Hi guys, today we're going to take a look at section 8.3, which is about solving rational equations. So the way we're going to make this work is I'm going to make one video for each example. We have a total of 5 examples. I'm also going to post the notes for you directly in your Google Classroom, so if you want to just read through them instead, that's totally completely fine. But then if you need the explanation, just find the video that goes with the example you're looking at and watch that. Okay, you can always contact me to ask any questions. Alright, so before we get started on this first example, if you look at the notes themselves, it tells you that in order to solve a rational equation, you first need to identify the least common denominator and your domain restrictions. Finding your domain restrictions is how you're going to identify if you have any extraneous solutions. So there's a potential of getting an answer that won't actually work because it makes the expression undefined. Okay? After that, you really have 2 choices on how you can proceed. You can start by multiplying each term by the least common denominator, and that will clear out the fractions altogether, which is what we used to do when we had just numerical denominators. So you can stick with that method. You can also go through and make each term in your equation have a common denominator, and if you do that, then it's really just the numerators that really need to equal each other because the denominators are already all the same. Okay? So with this first example, I'll do it both ways, and then from there on out, you can kind of choose which way you'd rather do it, okay? So this one starts off pretty basic because, as you can see, each denominator is a monomial, so we've got a much easier LCD to figure out here. All right, so let's review that real quick. Our least common denominator for this problem, when I look at the 3 denominators, this one has a 7, the others have coefficients of 1, so I need a 7 in my common denominator. And then I have an x squared here, an x squared here. That x could easily become an x squared, so I need an x squared in my LCD. So hopefully you guys remember how to find LCDs, but if not, just let me know and we will spend some time going over that. Okay, so now I need to figure out, well, how do I manipulate each of these to get that common denominator? So I'm going to start with what's a little bit more familiar to us, make the common denominator, and then look at the numerators after the fact. So I'm going to go with option 2 to start off. Okay. So this first term already has that common denominator, 7x squared. This one needs to be multiplied by 7 to get to 7x squared. This one, to get an x to become a 7x squared, I need to multiply it by both a 7 and an x. Okay? And remember, what you do to the bottom, you must also do to the top. Okay? So this first fraction isn't going to change on us at all because it already had the common denominator. Okay? Plus. Now this I'm multiplying top and bottom by 7, so that 2 times 7 becomes a 14 over 7x squared equals. And now this fraction multiplying top and bottom by 7x to get 7x over 7x squared. Okay. So now, since all of the denominators are the same, if all the numerator things are set equal to each other, then I will have an expression that works. Okay. I'll be able to solve for x. So now I'm going to pretend as if those denominators were never there. So, pretend this is gone, gone, and gone. And now we just have x minus 6 plus 14 is equal to 7x. A nice, easy equation for us to try to go through and solve. So I'm going to subtract the x to the other side, make this a 6x, combine these like terms to get an 8. And I get x is equal to 8 over 6, which we can reduce down to 4/3. So we have x equals 4/3. All right, so this has only one solution. The question is it an extraneous solution? So one thing you can do is you can go through and you can check your answer by plugging it in, but who wants to figure out 4/3 squared and then divide by that fraction? It's going to get really yucky if we do that. So instead, all we need to do is go back and look at our LCD and figure out, well, what were the domain restrictions? If this is not a domain restriction, then it gets to be our final answer. And I just realized I forgot to write the equal sign there. Sorry about that. Okay, so if I go back over to my LCD, our domain restriction here would just be x cannot equal 0. That's not the answer that we got. So in fact, we should have x equals 4/3 works in the original equation. Okay. Now I said there's an alternate way to do it, and that's multiplying by the LCD instead of creating the LCD for each term. So we're going to go through that over here in this blank space. Okay, let me just get a different marker real quick. All right, so again, back to the original problem. If I copy that down, x minus 6 over 7x squared plus 2 over x squared equals 1 over x. We already identified our least common denominator as 7x squared. I want to go through and take this whole thing and multiply it by 7x squared over 1. Okay? Or just multiply by 7x squared. And I'm sorry, that's really little, but that does say 7x squared. Okay. So now if I take this first fraction over here, if I multiply it by 7x squared, so think of it as 7x squared times this fraction, that and that would go away. I would be left with x minus 6. Now if I look at this middle term right here, 2 over x squared times 7x squared, that would be 14x squared over x squared, which is really just 14. So I have plus 14 equals. And then here, I would essentially have 7x squared over x. That reduces down to 7x. And you can see we are now at the exact same spot that we were right here. Okay? So a lot of the work is the same. It's just a matter of how you want to organize it and what you want to write down. So you could make them all have a common denominator and then pretend the denominators were not there. Just make sure you think about domain restrictions when you go to do your final answer. Write out your final answer. Okay? Or think about what your LCD is, multiply all the numerators essentially by that, and then reduce it down. Okay? There's a lot of canceling that can happen. All right? But one way or another, you're going to get to a final answer of x equals 4/3 on this problem. Okay? So that's our first one. We're going to go through 4 more. But if you have any questions, just let me know. And again, just watch the videos that you need.